Without any further delay, I will invite the participants to the first panel to come forth. And this section is called Perspective for Public Statistics. So presently we have Mr. Ronald, Mr. José Pessoa. He's been working in the publication of standards in the statistical field, in culture and education. He ensured the training of professionals in the field of cultural statistics globally and has extensive experience in supporting national statistical capacity building initiatives. He also co-authored or managed the production and publication of several handbooks. And before joining UNESCO, he was a project manager and analyst at Statistics Canada and the Council of Ministers of Education. He has a Master in Arts in Geography and a Bachelor of Environmental Studies from the University of Waterloo, and he'll be our moderator for this first session.
Great, thank you very much. So it's my pleasure to moderate session one, the opening session. And I would like to introduce to you the three distinguished guests who will participate in a sort of question and answer discussion. Looking forward to hearing their reflections, expertise, and opinions. So I'll start right to my left. As Ms. Patricia Caris, who is the Assistant Director General of the Quebec Institut for Statistics. And then the pleasure of welcoming my director, Silvia Montoya, from the UNESCO Institute for Statistics. And then beside her is, I'd like to introduce Mr. Ronald Jansen, Assistant Director of the United Nations Statistical Division and Department of Economic and Social Affairs. So thank you very much, first of all, panelists, for agreeing to this discussion, and the tone, or not the tone, but the theme is really on what is the perspectives for public statistics. So I have a series of questions, and I think we'll be able to then just go through, and I think perhaps at the end, if we have a few minutes, we can open the panel to the question and answer with the audience. So welcome, and I'd like to start off with my first question. And the conference this week will examine many issues and themes in regards to the measurement of digital cultural products. If you had to pick one primary issue facing public statistics, what would it be and why? So perhaps we can start with Madame Patricia Caris. Thank you.
Bonjour à tous et à toutes. Good morning to everybody. Before I begin, I'd like to introduce a little bit the Institut de la Statistique du Québec. Now, Institut was created in 1999, and its mission is to share statistic information that are reliable about the situation of Quebec in all aspects of society. So it is a privileged forum for analysis and dissemination of statistic data regarding economic, cultural questions, and to understand who are the players, so that we can develop and manage policies and public programs. When I was asked the question that Monsieur Pessoa just shared with you, I deemed it was good to begin the reflection with the role of a statistic agency. So when we're referring to the challenges relating to big data, we're talking about volume, of course. We're always impressed by the quantity, the amazing quantity of data that are generated. We think of the speed at which those data are being produced now, and we think of the variety of the diversity of different topics. But then there's another aspect that we sometimes forget. It's the aspect relating to validity and the question of representativity of the population that we're targeting. And that's a crucial element. So for us, of course, there's a whole list of other elements. Think of the confidentiality of data and many other aspects. But for us, it's always important to make sure that the data are not biased, that they're representative of the population targeted, that they're objective, and they meet our standards associated to our mission. So that's the very first answer to your question. And of course, we do not have the exclusivity in the production of data, or not even the production of data regarding public sector. Our role is to produce statistic data that could be that are considered as official, so that are considered as reference by the government. An example, the census, and a counterexample as well of the challenges that might be associated to the question of representativity. We saw to what extent the abolition of the long questionnaire deprived us of information on subpopulations or subgroups, and so we could not. It was impossible to offset that with administrative data. And those administrative data will fulfill a whole range of other needs as well. However, we will always need a referent to be able to measure the representativity. The production of administrative data that we often assimilate to big data or mega data are produced with other ends, not only specifically statistic ends, and they're already being used by agencies and for a long time. Is that process done in an optimal way? You know, that's another issue, that's another question that we won't deal with now. But our response doesn't depend only on statistic agents. We could ask the question, even in the field of research, for example, the access to those data by researchers, the position taken by the governments, all those are relevant questions. Of course, that increase exponentially the quantity of data, and the statistic agents, operators, have more and more difficulties to retrieve data thanks to probabilistic inquiries. So we have to find new ways to do things, and the use of big data and administrative data is particularly relevant to that effect. I will keep on distinguishing the administrative data that are generated for the public management of big data, even though they have in common the fact that they were not targeted initially to statistic ends. However, there are a lot of common things. Despite that, there are things that we know about administrative data that we do not know when we're talking about big data.
Perhaps the same question to Ms. Silvia Montoya. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I think that's very interesting to see how different perspectives could be articulated between the vision of, and I fully agree with what has been said from the Institute of Quebec, of Statistics of Quebec. And in the case of the Institute of Statistics of UNESCO, given the fact that we have to collect data from different areas of the world, concretely from different countries, and the challenge of having a more diversified and complex manifestation, not only in the area of culture, but in different areas that challenge us about the ownership of the data sources, and also the different way of defining and framing culture and how to measure and representativity, and the way data is collected in each country challenge us in different aspects that are central to our activity. The first has to do with the need to actually define some norms and standards about how we're going to be collecting the data, and when the data is falling into the different categories, and how we're going to be incorporating actually some of the new phenomena and a new manifestation of a cultural life, in this case, that is the eruption of the digital world, and how this is influencing different aspects of the cultural life, not only in terms of the use and manifestation of culture, but also the employment in different activities and how much resources are generating for the economy. The fact that the Institute has to produce standards and methods in order to collect the globally comparable data makes us challenge in terms of some of our current products. So we know that we need to adapt to actually incorporate the digital framework in some of our main methodologies. So the framework for cultural statistics needs to have some update, and where our team is working in trying to frame. I know that some of the lessons they are going to be learned here, and they are going to be discovered as area of potential work, are going to be contributed to this framing in trying to understand and how to incorporate better to our framework. The national education account that I measure in the open is a methodology that has been already applied in some countries. We have some guidelines, but still we need to actually update and to incorporate in those methodologies, because so far it's not extended all over the world, but it's something that we aim to actually be guiding and framing in terms of having a good overall measurement of culture in the countries, and we need to incorporate necessarily the digital world there. And we know that we need to actually be working on this. And from the side of the data gathering process, we are also working and we are pretending to work the same we do in our areas with the quality of assessment, the process of collecting data. We need that each country defines, and it happens not only in culture, but in different areas, in different ways, and we have different problems. We have problems of representativity, we have problems of sample, we have problems of the way the federal and the non-federal states treat data and how they record and how much is aggregated at the country level. When they report to us, actually they could be in some cases representing the 100% of the expenditure in the area or the contribution of the area. In some other cases it depends on how they track and record statistics, and this is one of the usual problems that the Institute is having in many of the areas. And to do a fair comparison and a fair understanding of the reality of the countries, we actually need to have good information. And to have good information means also having a good process and some parameters in terms of collection, and the well-known in the UN Statistical Commission and the UN framework of the data quality assessment framework, that are tools that are used in general in many different sectors to actually assess us in terms of the quality of the data processes. We have to also include culture and the new manifestation of culture in terms of that. And this has impacted some of the work of the Institute, that we have already two of our surveys that are trying to address, but we go to the field, we discover that in those data sources the digital aspects are not really well incorporated, or have not, though at the general level, they are not still very well framed in the sense that we need. We have currently one survey on film statistics that is a usual survey from the Institute that has some periodicity, and we need to actually been changing this questionnaire to include this type of activity with more precision. The second one is a new survey that is an employment in cultural activity. We know that because of the code of classification, we have digital activities there, but we need also to see how to better define and how to better precise the work in culture. We're going to have some of our main results and the first ones in the second quarter of this year, and so we're looking forward to see how we could improve. But in terms of an international agency that has to produce comparable data, we're facing all these three steps that have to do with the data collection, with the quality of the process of collecting data, and with the definition of norms and standards. That are a whole challenge that we need to frame all together. So we are leading, but we have to work in partnership with the rest of you to try to better precise this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Silvia. I would say, Ronald, I'll give you the opportunity to add or to also give your perspective on, if you had to pick one primary issue facing public statistics, what would it be and why?
Thank you, José. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting the United Nations Statistics Division to this event. The purpose of our division is especially on the topic of standardization and common terminology, comparability of data. my office, and the same holds for the UNESCO Institute for Statistics, tries to work together with the national statistical officers to do this work on standardization and terminology. And I think, so to come to the question, most important aspect here is what I call relevance of official statistics, where I especially put the emphasis on official. So here was indicated as public. Official means it is, so there is a common terminology, there is some kind of quality and standard and comprehensiveness behind the fact that these statistics are put out by either the National Statistical Office, by a professional statistical office, or by the international agencies. The official statistics are funded on the fundamental principles of official statistics, which, and I mentioned that because it also indicates independence. And I think part of the discussion which we'll have here also is that you can do statistics in very many ways. The official statistics, you want to have this independent, impartial, and those kinds of quality aspects, which is also meant for to serve, to be beneficial for all citizens in a kind of support for a democratic society. So that's the part on official and standardizing, and I think on the cultural statistics, what we're talking about, terminology and definitions, especially when we start talking about digitalized cultural products, I think it's very important, because that, I think, is a lot of confusion about what is new and what is the same as it used to be. Relevance is the aspect of this point. Relevance is in regards to other producers of statistics and data. And then I'm talking about the, let's say, the official statistics side, who generally tries to put out high quality data, but sometimes with a time lag. And for certain kinds of policy issues, timeliness is a very high quality aspect. And I think that's some part where the official statisticians have to work on. Now, the good part of digitalized data is that it's available very quickly. So the challenge is for also the official statisticians is to actually use that quickly availability of those data to produce high quality, official and timely data. And I think that's where our challenge will lie. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much to all the panelists. Is there anything that anyone else wants to add? If I can just move on to the second question. Thank you. Clearly there are many issues that we're facing and from various perspectives. I guess building upon this particular topic of issue, I'd like to ask the question, and some of this has already been touched upon in different aspects of each of the panelists' answers, but so can you describe briefly how the emergence of digital economy has impacted each of your respective organizations in regards to the standards, norms, methodology, data production, data analysis? Perhaps we can begin, I know, with Silvia. I know you mentioned in your first answer aspects of this already.
Yes,
I mean,
that's
elements.
very good. Yes, this is a good point. I mean, I already mentioned that in some of our services, we have to review some of our standards and methodologies, and we have been working with the team hard on this one. And we are really having two of our service, and I think that some of the things that also Ronald has been mentioning in terms of it's a new phenomenon in all areas, the issue of the big data, the data revolution, and all this discussion about that actually talks about the complexity and the diversity of data sources, and also concept there is calling for us and the one who are in charge of running from different perspectives, the UN agencies in terms of adapting and trying to come with some responses to include this new type of phenomena. That in the area of culture, we know that they also in communication, there are a lot of this phenomenon, and in education, there are also as well. I mean, we have the emergence of different actors and different producers of information, and we need to actually work with this to have to address, we have to incorporate, and we have to accept that reality. As one former president of my country, Argentina, says, that it's not more compelling truth than reality. Reality has that you have a diversified environment, you have all different owners. In some areas it's more intense than others, but we have non-state actors, and we have to come with responses for these non-state actors, and we have different manifestations of cultural. We have to deal with old problems, and we have new challenges to measure, and the challenge for us is also to adapt, to come with norms and standards, and try to see how it impacts on our work in a way that we have to come with answers. So we know that for different levels of government and for different agencies, we need to come with an answer in a quicker way, because policymakers at the same time have to make decisions. People have to make decisions, and I think that the best way to do is try to guide in the best way we could, that is by producing norms and standards. I really do think that this is the way to move forward.
Thank you, Silvia. Ronald, same question in relation to UNSD.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So my background is international trade. And so in the area of international trade, we had this shift between goods and services due to the digitalization of things like a book. So if you buy a book in a shop or you buy a book online, you can still buy it in hard copy, or you can buy it as an electronic book. If you buy it as a hard copy, and for international trade you ship it over the border, that's still registered by customs, and it gets into trade. If you do this online and you just download it, it really doesn't go via the customs administration anymore, and that's why we internationally decided to then call it a service. So we moved the aspect there of international trade from goods to services on those kinds of issues, and you would have similar things in music and all kinds of those aspects. So that's one change which was brought about. How do we measure it? Where do we allocate it? How does it represent the economy? Another part, and directly associated, is globalization due to the electronic access to like the e-commerce and so forth. Globalization takes much more a forefront on this, and especially where does the value added, as we call that in the economy, get allocated, and where should we allocate this? So we have this fragmentation of production. It's also because IT has so much improved over the last decades. We do outsourcing of IT over the borders because it's easy to do nowadays. We can get IT services from across the border, so that's one other aspect I can mention in here. And within that also the profit shifting, and we come back to this in other sessions. But the profit shifting, that's where we have a little bit also a work relation now with the context of royalties, licenses, how those are getting paid, and where the profits are being shifted to around the world. But we'll come back to that. Finally, big data is, I think, sometimes a confusing issue. So we have, let's say, the cultural digitized product, big data, and we'll come also back to that in other sessions. For me, it's several things, but mostly other things than the digitized products. Thank you.
Thank you. And Patricia, the same question to you. Describe briefly how the emergence of the digital economy has impacted your respective organization in regards to standards and norms, methodology, data production, or data analysis. Thank you.
D'accord. Peut-être. Now, the question relates to how, when you're part of a statistic agency and you're carrying out the survey, how can we determine the level of precision that we wish and the size of our sample? In the case of the digital, it's impossible to do so. However, we have, as I mentioned before, we have a whole school, existing school, that is the administrative one. But it's always the issue of the analysis and the quality of data that is at stake. With the digital, of course, we have more data, and we have access faster to that data compared to the traditional method. Therefore, the decision-making people expect to have access to those data much faster. And it's very difficult to explain for reasons of quality, why we might have to wait a couple of years to get the results of the census or other surveys. We might think that the use of mega data could help us have access to data much faster, or creating a register of population could reduce the size of the sampling and increase the access to it, because the information can be accessed faster. And the surveys themselves, their role would probably be reviewed in the light of that situation. So there are already ongoing reflections and discussions on that. Most of statistic agencies will turn towards an increased use of big data, at least from the administrative point of view of data. And that already is a challenge. And there are all kinds of works that were started in the last years, and we are ending up with good results. It helps the different organizations. However, we still have a lot of work to do in order to optimize the administrative data piece. And there are already sectors where it is done by using several sources of data. For example, surveys on remuneration are using as well administrative sources of data. We might think that we would end up with data used systematically in the future, but what will matter from the methodological point of view will be to properly understand the scope and the limitations of the data that we're using, and that's where we're lacking information often. It's a very complex task when we're dealing with administrative data, even though we know how they were produced and how they were produced. So when we're thinking of data produced by individuals through social networks or through transactional websites, the capacity to measure the scope of that data is much more difficult, and that's one of the main challenges. Furthermore, there are other things that we'll probably look at during those 3 days, and it's the whole issue of the mechanism for protection of personal data. For administrative data, we have already existing mechanisms, and they've been on for a few years. In Quebec, we have very coercive types of mechanism in that respect. With the broader production and with the advent of big data, how will we be able to manage that? For example, using data that are in some cases are personal, or data that in some cases were not necessarily associated to the use of that data for other ends, to whom those data belong, what are the rules to access that data? Those are some of the questions that the officials have to ask themselves.
This question is on the topic of public-private partnerships. So, as you know, much data on digital cultural products is currently collected in the private sphere. So, for example, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, Facebook, Google, Shazam, etc. It's been suggested that there will be a need to establish public-private partnerships for data production. What are your views on this? And perhaps we can start with Ronald. Thank you.
Thank you, José. It's a difficult question, but we do try to cooperate with larger enterprises in 2 different ways currently, and this is both from my work towards trade and globalization. That's one area. The other area I'm actually working on is also big data, so that is a good coincidence. In the area of trade and globalization, we try to work with large and complex companies to understand how they are organized globally, and that is like for the likes of Google and Amazon and so forth. That is of interest there to see how they operate, and just from the point of view of for economic analysis or for economic statistics, where we allocate what. And how that works, and also in the area of what I mentioned, this profit shifting, is if they have foreign affiliates, how do they work with these areas? And that is of interest for where royalties and things like that are allocated within the company. So these things we like to understand, and that's how we like to partner with international organizations, with large companies to get that work forward. Another part is and I think that's also part of this question here, is those organizations which actually provide data or would be able to provide data for analysis, and that's where this global working group we have now on big data for official statistics is interested to partner with, well, for instance, telecommunication companies on the use of mobile phone data, and then of course we get immediately into the topic of privacy and access to data and things like that. But also with Google or Twitter and Facebook. Twitter and Facebook, they have been approached in a number of countries. They are working with them. Twitter actually makes a small portion of their data publicly available for analysis, and that's being done in a number of countries. And they use it for sentiment analysis. And this sentiment analysis is also used as official, or almost used as official statistics. So that's where the connection lies. Another one is, for instance, is searches, and the Google is a company which would help also if you want to do some analysis of searches on the internet. Google can help with that. Google also has a facility that they would do surveys for you. They mostly do this on the marketing purposes to do kinds of surveys, but I think from official statistics point of view, we like to work with them on other kinds of surveys for more public good issues. There will also be a session on big data, I think it's later today, and one of the ones which will be represented is within this context of this global working group on big data, we have a so-called sandbox, which is a platform of IT where we do analysis of big data, which is located in Ireland. And Fernando Reyes from Eurostat will show what they've been doing on Wikipedia data in relation to searches on cultural issues. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ronald. Silvia, your views.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I like the issue of a partnership in private-public statistics is some of the challenges that the Institute has, not only in culture, but also in education and science and technology and innovation, that we have so many producers of data. And we have to actually, in general, we collect data from member states, and the member states send the data, and then we certify that the data is the data coming from the country, and this is the usual way the Institute has been working for a while. Now this new challenge of having so many people producing data in a kind of a non-staying way, it challenges us in terms of how we're going to be working with them. We have already some partnership in some of the areas in trying to go over the use of some of our standards and methodology, concretely in the case of education, still not yet incorporated, but in the sense that helping the people who are actually collecting the data with some of the criteria and methods we're using to produce our official statistic, or the member state have to produce the official statistic led by the work of the UN Statistical Commission, and the principles that are set is part of the areas that we need to work. We need to accept, and actually we need to produce guidelines and to try to help in education we're doing in some of the areas that are also some of our work. We need to be working and try to come with the use of common criteria. So we know that people are going to be, for different activities, collecting data as part of their business, and in some cases the business is to collect data in parallel. And in some of the areas, timeliness also demands to be working. So in some of other areas of work of the United Nations, there are cases like humanitarian aid. Most of the cases come from data that is non-official, because it needs to be quickly solved. We need to have some idea of how many aid is going to countries, because people are needing, if we really go to produce and check some of the issues that have been already raised by Patricia, I mean, the people who are needing some aid or need to have some focus aid or need some movements are not going to get the help they need. So we have a challenge of equality. And so we have some sister agencies that already have faced the challenge of seeing how to do the partnership in data collection and how to deal with that. And it's very interesting to see that at least we can establish some criteria about the quality of these data production processes. We can still have some idea of when the data is not exactly going to be with the quality eventually of the criteria if we have the time to go over some of the issues that have to do with quality, but at least we can know when the data are good enough to actually judge and take decisions over on that data, and we know when some data are really having some of much more noise. So some of our sister agencies have already developed some mechanism to actually assess and to guide us in terms of understanding. If you go to some of the data that's published by for instance, OCHA, you are going to see some traffic light type of colors, and then you are going to see in what cases the data is kind of more reliable than in other cases in trying to inform us. We have other cases that also affects our data in the case of education, like for example refugees, the information of refugees that is a very delicate topic from the humanitarian point of view, and also demands a lot of pressure in so many countries, are collected by different instances, and in some cases are official, in some cases not. And the agency that is concretely working is really trying to get, and we're really trying to get the standards and norms and protocols. So I think that there we have a lot of room and for working with, and the reality is that there are many actors involved, and the way we have to try to go over this process is trying to actually include some guidelines and some common criteria and methods about how to proceed. We know that in the end, not everybody has the possibility to do in the neat way we really would want to do, but at least we still have some room for guiding and to try to help in terms of at least to get the data with some minimum information, with some minimum quality, and with some caveats or warnings about why to take more seriously or not some of the information that is produced and given by those partners. So I think that is part of our reality we have to face, and the only way is try to sit down and just try to see how we're going to come and make understand why we're choosing some criteria or not. And I think that dialogue is the only way to actually work and make a productive effort of the money that is spent in collecting data.
Thank you, Silvia. Patricia, same question on public-private partnership.
C'est une belle question.
Oui.
It's a wonderful question, actually. Indeed, it's maybe in the cultural industry that the Institute is the most important observatory. It has the most expertise of using big data, actually. We initiated some works in order to describe the production of cultural products, digital ones, televisual, etc. The works have been adapted, and it showed some limits, very fast, partial coverage, uncertainty as to the collected data, no access because of the American industry. All the data going through the internet cannot be really well measured. In the past, we did do some survey work, but now we have too many data that really go beyond our treatment, our capacities. We receive some data from non-structured means. There is also many data that have to be dealt with. Some private companies will give us some data regarding CDs or DVDs, for instance. For the past few years, those firms have been trying to negotiate agreements with Amazon and other platforms to compile the information regarding the album purchases, but with the boom of consumption, with the streaming, etc., the specific firms are trying to obtain some information among the different active companies on the market. I do not know them, actually. But those firms do require privacy respect as to their market share. They have some agreements with these companies. It's very hard to identify where the auditors live regarding the different disc use. And that's where we see the challenge challenging issues. We have to work with private companies and with this industry. It's quite a complex market, and it's very hard for institutions, both private and public ones. So for us, it's very interesting to hear Silvia's and Mr. Jansen's information regarding the work that they've been doing.
I had a fourth question, but we only have 5 minutes, so I think that I'd like to perhaps open the floor with the last 5 minutes if there's any questions for the panelists in regards to the three questions of the subject matter. I want to thank again the panelists for very interesting insights, answers, opinions in a very difficult area. So I would like to open the floor. We have 5 minutes. Is there anyone who would like to ask a question? Please come up forward to the microphone. Just maybe 1 or 2 questions we have time for. Thank you. That's it. This goes quick. Just please state your name and organization. Thank you.
Bonjour. Claude.
Good morning, Claude Martin from the University of Montreal and University of Quebec in Trois-Rivières. So more and more cultural products are flowing around without leaving any physical trace. We are used to having data on physical content, maybe regarding the audience or people going to a movie, data regarding the TV, etc. But all those data are becoming more and more a restrained part of the world. Up to one point, do we have to keep producing data on physical objects, or such as TV audience, for instance, because we will be told, why do we keep collecting those data since it's no longer the reality of the market? So, for instance, the consumption of on-demand products on TV screens within a home goes beyond, is more important as compared to the movie attendance data, even though this really is very important, but it costs a lot of money.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Silvia.
I think that this is one of the challenges we have. We have to review the method, the standard, and the way we're going to be collecting the data, and actually the partnership with private, because there are many organizations that are measuring different ways of consumption, and we need to actually, this is a challenge. It's a good agenda for my team, actually.
Ronald.
Thank you. I think thank you for the question. I think the answer lies into what is the policy relevance of what do we want to answer as questions by statistics. I think a number of decades ago, when television came about, people were watching television and they thought nobody would go to the cinema anymore, but that did not prove to be true. But the thing is more from the policy point of perspective. So if you want to have the physical evidence, it's related probably to maybe cinemas and the number of cinemas available and so forth, and the likelihood and things like that. So, and then people doing more streaming and looking more at Netflix and things like that. It's maybe other kinds of policy questions on the economic side. So I think it's the question like, what does society in general or governments would like to look at in perspective of cultural advancement or in perspective of economic analysis. Thank you.
Peut-être une réponse qui peut paraître bizarre.
Maybe a weird answer, but I'm convinced that one of the things we did not mention related to the use of several data, whether survey data, administrative data, or big data, generally speaking. But we should actually understand better what the purpose of each of those data and how we can use them. And curiously, to answer your question, Mr. Martin, I would rather say if we don't have any physical trace or printing, why don't we turn to the population to measure their use of this data?
At the end of our session, so I know we had someone else wanted to ask a question, so perhaps later in the program or at coffee break, because take two more? Are you sure? Okay, my apologies. Okay, we'll take one more question.
Merci.
Thank you.
Ça devrait être assez bref.
I would like to be brief, actually. As an international agency dealing with the statistics, I was wondering whether you had established some relationships with sectoral international agencies by niche or cultural industries. When we think about IFP for music purposes or Grammy Academic that also works on establishing common criteria or standards, who are also thinking about how to collect usage data. What kind of exchanges do you have with this industry at the international level?
It looks like more coming from the Institute of Statistics of UNESCO. Anyway, I think that this is a good example of, because of the needs of the business, the fact that they are standardizing and using common criteria, and this looks and actually talks very well about the way any statistical activity comes, about the fact that defining methods and classifying, I mean, since Foucault, this is the way of doing statistics. So we agree on the fact that we need to depart from that. We need to actually strengthen in some of the partnership, and we have been mentioning in terms of collecting, we have already working with the team and defining some of the needs to actually go into that, but that then we need to actually come and use the methods and framework that are defined from the United Nations. We're never close to doing that. In education and in the other areas, we're working with partners and trying to precise some of the terminologies and coming to an agreement. This is exactly the way we're proceeding with the cultural activities. It's a kind of new area. In general, some of the issues were more related to measuring heritage of some of the other areas that are still a challenge. The way of measuring these different activities are a whole area of a lot of development, and we know we need to strengthen these activities. So we're keeping on adding to the activities for my team, and I know José and Lydia are really very happy about the agenda behind, like we have forward. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Final comments? No? Ronald, I'm looking at you.
Yes, I will be very brief, because this is really a question for the UNESCO Institute of Statistics. But in general, one thing I think is that the associations and what we call that non-governmental institutes, they certainly first work on a very local level, and I would say they would have most influence there. But if there are issues which are more of a global level, then there is interactions in principle within the United Nations context. Now, statistics has been very bad, has a bad record, at least from the statistics division, of talking to NGOs, because we think we're technical and we leave the political issues to others. But nowadays, especially with the Sustainable Development Goals, with indicators for the targets and goals, NGOs have been much more active, the non-governmental organizations, and there is now more responsiveness in a number of areas, mostly in like human rights and immigration. But I mean, in the cultural area, there could be, even though there's not much going on at the moment. Thank you. At least nothing.
Okay, thank you very much. This concludes the session. I want to again thank our panelists for a very interesting conversation.
Merci beaucoup, effectivement, pour cette première session.
So thank you indeed for this first session. We will go to a break. It will be in the room next door, but the panelists will remain here. So if you have questions, you can ask them. That's the idea, actually, of the organization, to have an action between the panelists and the audience. So we will be back at 11 sharp. Thank you.